Hello and welcome to the Octopus Revenue Podcast. This is an educational and informative podcast series all about hotel revenue management. We have some great discussions for you in each episode to give you insights and tips on all of the major issues facing us in the hospitality industry. It's no revelation to any of you that COVID-19 has had a major impact on our industry. The big question is, though, how do we bounce back and how do we do it safely? We want to help you get an understanding of what's going on and how those of us in the revenue management community can effectively and proactively respond and plan for recovery. There's never been a better time to share ideas and pass on knowledge to support one another, because the road out of this might be long, but we're all on that road together. In this episode, I'm joined by Steph Gibson, Director of Revenue Management at Chris Stewart Group. We will hear Steph's thoughts on how the cancellation of the Edinburgh Festival will impact the city and her thoughts around the proposed Transient Visitor Levy. I enjoyed catching up with Steph, especially as I used to live and work in Edinburgh, and it's always been a market close to my heart. Hi Steph, great to have you join us today.
Hi Sarah, nice to speak to you.
Just for the listeners, Steph, would you mind just giving us a brief overview of your role in the company?
Yeah, of course. So as you said, I work for the Chris Stewart Group. We've got 3 service department buildings in Edinburgh underneath the Cheval brand. We also have a hotel in Edinburgh under the Courtyard by Marriott brand, and we've got some new projects coming alive in the next few years across Edinburgh and Glasgow. So an exciting time for our company at the moment.
Sounds exciting. So how have you found the last 4 months during lockdown, and what would you say have been your biggest challenges throughout?
Well, I think it's been a bit of a roller coaster for everybody, hasn't it? But I've worked throughout, so I am very grateful for that. There's many people in our industry that can't share that at the moment. It's been odd. I've been homeschooling, as has a huge majority of the population. So that's always been a bit of a challenge, trying to do the schooling and the work all at the same time, and trying to, balance a Zoom call with, your children having activities to do at the same time. But yeah, it's been interesting, shall we say? And there's been ups and downs, but overall, it's been good, I think.
Yeah, the homeschooling has definitely threw up challenges across the board, I think. And I think now hotels are looking to reopen. Steph, they're looking at plans, etc., and trying to find a way of how they can trade in line with current guidelines. I think a lot of their emphasis at the moment has been around health and hygiene. How are you preparing mentally right now, and what areas from a revenue management perspective are you focusing on?
Yeah, so we've been in a fortunate position actually that one of our properties has remained open throughout the whole of lockdown. So from that perspective, we're probably a step ahead of the curve, just that our building's operational, all our health and hygiene changes that we have to make have been made, and they're working, which is good. We've got facial temperature gauges, I think that's the right word for them, as you walk through the front door. We've got our 2 metre social distancing stickers on the floor, so it's really clear for people where they go. But we're also in a fortunate position that because we're service departments, we do contactless check-in, we do keyless access. All that was part of the fabric of our building before anyway. So from that perspective, from an operational perspective, we're definitely probably more organised than some of our peers that have been closed throughout. Mentally, though, it's really difficult because, a lot of the work that I'm doing at the moment is trying to assess the business and assess the demand and see when exactly we're going to be able to open up some more buildings. And as we gradually do bring some more staff into the building, it's, I personally myself went in one day this week because I had a project that needed me to be on site, and it was quite nerve-wracking. I was exhausted afterwards. I hadn't really anticipated the mental exhaustion that was going to come with doing something as trivial as going to work, but it did. It took its toll by the end of the day, so it was very strange. And I think we need to be mindful of that for all our staff and guests as they do return.
And how have you kept up to date with trends? Have you had any specific go-to tools that you've utilised over the last few months, and have they changed from what you typically would have used in the past as a revenue manager?
Well, I don't know if they've changed as such. I think I, along with every other RM in the country, has probably been addicted to the STR webinars every Thursday or every second Thursday. They've been brilliant, giving us really good insights, especially at the beginning. I felt that they were really, really good. I think I've used LinkedIn a little bit more than normal, reading other people's articles, reading other people's opinions, getting ideas and guides. But on a whole, information has been more limited. So it's just been about finding the little bits of data that you can get your hands on and trying your best to apply them across your business.
And we've learned a while back that the Edinburgh Festival will not be taking place this year for the first time in over 70 years. So August for Edinburgh hotels will be very different this year. Do you see Edinburgh becoming a domestic leisure hotspot, as it may be the first summer in a long time that's actually more affordable for guests?
I'm not sure. I hope so. The positives for August is that it will definitely be more affordable. The schools in general will still be on holiday. Certainly the English schools will still be on holiday. It's easy to get to. There's lots of green space in Edinburgh. There's loads of positives. So I do hope it becomes a bit of a hotspot for domestic leisure. But there's no doubt that the festival and everything that came with the festival, all the book festival, the fringe, everything, the tattoo, of course, it's going to be a massive knock to the city for the month. We average about 430,000 visitors every August just going to festival events. So, we just don't have the footfall this year that we've had in previous years.
And when I look back at stats, if we take the average occupancy for the last 3 Augusts, it's coming out at 91.9% occupancy. Are you willing to put a number on what you think August occupancy will get up to this year? Do you have a prediction at all?
Oh, I'd love to have a prediction. I think it's going to be sub 50%. I know that's really vague, but as I said, one of our properties has managed to remain open. So, we're doing a really good occupancy on a kind of Tuesday, Wednesday night at the moment, which is unusual. We're normally a leisure-based business, but because of the type of essential traveller that we're allowed to house at the moment, and of course there is no holiday makers, we've turned into a little bit more of a corporate trend. So Tuesday, Wednesday's been more busy than a Saturday, which is totally unheard of for us normally. So I think the thing is for us, what happens when the other hotels open? Because I can look at the business that we're doing now and trend that through. Of course I can. But as other hotels open up, the small amount of travellers that are coming to the city are going to get spread a bit more thinly. So I'm just trying to keep an eye at the moment as to when other properties are going to open and try to gauge how much of that business we may lose to either a bigger brand or the hotel that they would normally stay at, or even an area that they would normally stay at that's been closed. So it's really, really difficult to put your finger on a number at the moment, really difficult.
And this is likely to evolve over the next sort of 4 to 6 weeks as hotels start to reopen their doors and the supply increases. Yeah,
we were hoping to see a bit of a bounce in pickup after the last 2 announcements from the First Minister. And we have seen a little bit, but I think people are just going to be so cautious and not make decisions until they're absolutely ready to, get in their car and drive to the location as such. So.
Yeah. And Edinburgh is widely known on the international stage and has relied upon a high percentage of international visitors over the years. I read an article in the Caterer recently discussing the proposed Transient Visitor Levy. And just for the listeners, this is a city tax that the council are looking to introduce, which is £2 per room per night. How do you think this will impact tourism moving forward, Steph? And do you think the TVL is a good move or not?
So I've kind of got 2 answers for this, if I'm honest. I read that article in the Caterer as well, and I was surprised with how much support it had. I wouldn't have said it was that much, because talking and amongst the industry in Edinburgh, people are not as keen as certainly that article would indicate. Pre-COVID, I don't think it was going to make too much of a difference. I think people would have came to Edinburgh regardless because of all the events, because of the type of city it is and how desirable it is. Post-COVID, I'm not convinced it will be widely received very well at all. It's just another cost for a tourist that, that might be the £2 that sways them between Edinburgh and somewhere else in the country that doesn't have that on top of it. It'll also depend on how hotels deal with it. Do you include it in the rate? Do you add it on? It's going to be a bit of a minefield. I'll be surprised if it does actually come to fruition in 2021. However, I would really like to see that being pushed back an extra year or so.
And what is Edinburgh doing as a city to help the rebound, especially in the current climate where the likes of Marketing Edinburgh and the Convention Bureau have been hibernated?
Yeah, it's really difficult at the moment with us not having a convention bureau, but Edinburgh as a city pulls together really well. So we've got ETAG, which work with as a fraction of the Scottish enterprise, the Edinburgh Tourism Action Group. They're doing an awful lot towards trying to pull the city together, and really drive the city where we don't have representation elsewhere. I'm actually quite involved with a small sub-focus group within that group for business tourism. So it's good. The city's pulling together, from restaurants to the EICC to hotel companies. It's a real wide range of people. I think the city as a whole will come together and sell as a city really well. What I'm a bit more concerned about is how we're represented globally as a destination at the moment, when we're coming up against, even Glasgow, for example, that's got a really strong convention bureau and they're representing, selling the city. We just don't have anybody doing that for us at the moment.
And I think the demand for Edinburgh will always remain strong, especially over the summer months. It's just a question of when those international travel bans will be lifted, I suppose.
Yeah, and keeping an eye on the quarantine status is the other big hot point at the moment.
Yeah. So, revenue managers rely a lot on their tools to make informed decisions. Rate shopping data, just to use that as an example, is not really relevant to use as a guide right now, given that teams are furloughed and hotels are still closed. What are you using as a guideline to set your pricing?
So over the last couple of months, we've actually, for the property that's remained open, we have had a flat rate structure in. We didn't feel it was morally right to charge too much for these rooms. But equally, it was made business sense. We wanted to get as much business through the doors to keep as many people employed as we possibly could. So where we would normally be very used to a really dynamic pricing structure, it's not been the case over the last couple of months. And I think that might be something we may have to adopt moving forward. It will really depend on what we see our competitors doing as and when they open up. There's a lot of very, very rock bottom prices in Edinburgh at the moment. We just need to make sure that as a city, and I think this goes for all cities actually, not just Edinburgh, you need to make sure that we are keeping the integrity of the rate relatively high for future years, because what we don't want to happen is that everybody fights for the same piece of business and drives the rate through the floor. And just keeping an eye on the wider city. Some of the rate shopping that I do includes properties that I would never pit us against in a normal trading environment. But you need to really look at the market from the customer's viewpoint and really decide where you want to be placed within what is available.
You mentioned before you checked the pickup of rooms after the last two announcements from the First Minister, so you're looking at your own property to see what the pickup is. Do you use other tools such as Forward Star, which I think was born in Edinburgh, to see if that pickup is the same across the city?
Yeah, I use Forward Star a lot. We've got two really good reports from Forward Star. We use the whole sub-market, and then we've got kind of a narrowed down comp set as well. Some weeks it makes interesting reading, some weeks there's absolutely no movement. But yeah, I kind of use that an awful lot at the moment.
And how do you see distribution channels changing over the coming months? Will direct channels overtake OTAs, do you think?
Initially I thought they would. I thought consumers would be far more comfortable to book on brand web rather than using a big OTA or a travel agent. However, the small amount of pickup that we have been seeing, I would say the trend is back to where it was before. Without naming names, we have one property that's heavily OTA led, and the pickup has all been OTA led again. So yeah, just keeping an eye on it to see if that trend is something that's going to continue. We all know that the big OTAs are going to have far more marketing budget than the independent brands. So it just really depends who's first at the races, I guess, in terms of Google searches and where you appear. So yeah, I don't think it's probably going to change that much.
It's interesting because the way OTAs have handled cancellation and refunding, etc., they're probably a lot quicker off the mark than maybe some hotels.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if that's giving the customer more confidence. If they do need to cancel, they'll get, a no quibble refund straight away.
Yeah, it definitely will be giving more confidence to the consumer, I think. Yeah, I mean, there was one OTA in particular that I felt dealt with it very well, both from a customer and from a property level. The others were pretty quick to follow the lead as well. Yeah, I think customers will. The thing is, they will always trust a brand. A customer will always trust a brand, whether that's a big brand hotel or whether it is the brand of the OTA that they put the trust into.
And I think smaller independents maybe have an opportunity now in these early phases of planning and preparation to get their marketing message out there on their website to mirror that you can have confidence in booking here or are flexible terms and conditions.
Yeah, that's just it. I've been doing a little bit of a survey around my friends and family just to see what's going to trigger people to book, and it's definitely flexible cancellation policies is well up there. I mean, we know it in the industry and we read it in the industry, but I found it really interesting actually speaking to people that I know will be booking for later on the year. It's cancellation policies and hygiene that's the two things that go above all else.
Yep, definitely. And now, Steph, with social distancing measures causing capacity restraints as it stands at the moment, the rule is 2 metres and we know it's under review. Do you think revenue managers will now have to get more involved with restaurant revenue management, and do you think this would be a good move?
The short answer to that is yes. I think in hotels, we've generally applied a little bit of food and beverage revenue management anyway. Or certainly I have, even if it's as basic as, we know the restaurant's not that busy on a Tuesday night, for example, so let's put together a dinner, bed and breakfast package, that will help support the restaurant on those lower demand dates. But I do think moving forward, even non-accommodation providers, like standalone restaurants, etc., they really have to be looking at their demand and applying fairly simple techniques just to make sure that they make the most of what they've got, and we are going to start talking more about things like revenue per available square metre, revenue by seat, or, whatever it may be. And I think the people that will be really successful are the ones that do open with a different approach and do have different ideas. And accommodation revenue managers have been doing it for years. So we are the kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? We're the kind of automatic go-to choice for the advice to give the restaurants to be able to try to yield as much revenue as possible.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's just aligning all of those outlets up along with the accommodation strategy will be the challenge, because we've got residents to think about, but for properties that would, allow non-residents to book the restaurant, I think there's a lot to think about there in terms of maximising, the seats that you have under those constraints to get the most use out of that space.
And we've been doing it with meetings and events for such a long time now. I mean, even that doesn't seem like too new a concept anymore. But, I think meetings and events is something that's going to take a bit of a dip. But I do think independent food and beverage will continue to grow. So it's just shifting the focus of your yield tools to more the restaurants rather than the meetings and event space.
And just in light of food options for customers moving forward, do you see self-catering apartments taking the lead over and above traditional hotel accommodation?
I think certainly in the short term they will do. I think people will have comfort in the fact that they're in their own bubble space, they've got their own kitchen, as long as they know that they can get supermarkets close by or they can get great food deliveries. We know loads of restaurants are doing these amazing at-home deals at the moment. So I think if hotels can work in partnership with some bigger restaurants, then, or certainly their own in-house restaurant, then self-catering will work. I think in the long term, however, people will want to go away for a holiday and they will want to go to a restaurant and dine. It's one of the key selling points. So I do think long term that will still remain, but in the short term I do think self-catering will perhaps have a bit of a boost over the traditional hotel 32 square metre bedroom, no kitchen kind of setup.
And you mentioned earlier about you're seeing a spike in corporate travel across Tuesdays and Wednesdays, which is quite unusual for your properties. What kind of changes do you see across market segmentation moving forward?
Oh, it's difficult to say. I mean, there's a different story for every market segment at the moment. So corporate, where we are seeing a little bit of a boost just now, but that is because it's essential workers. That's the only people travelling, and it's the only people we're allowed to house. So, there is consequence to why we're seeing that boost. I think as markets open up, we will see a little bit more of the corporate market travel, but travel bans in the big corporations will continue, and that market is not going to be there forever. It will die down. And then the holiday market, so whether it's a traditional FIT or if it's more OTA or, whatever it may be, it's really the unknown at the moment. It really, really is the unknown. We do expect to see a bit of a boost in general in domestic UK leisure, as we've been speaking about loads, but it's what happens when the plateau comes. Once everybody in the UK has travelled that wants to travel, we have no other markets, certainly not at the moment, that we're allowed to take into the country. So what happens at that point?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this all unfolds over the next few months ahead. And just to round off, Steph, we've lived through this last 4 months and, touch wood, we won't have to live through this ever again, but it's given us time to reflect and adjust our lives. If you had to pick 3 key takeaways, what would they be?
From a hospitality perspective, certainly, it's been a really sad time for the industry. There's been a lot of job losses and a lot of closures, and I think that's going to continue. So, but overall, I think people are still remaining really positive within the industry, or certainly these people I'm speaking to remain positive. We've got a bit of a blank canvas moving forward, so that's going to be super exciting. We can rewrite the rules. And hospitality at its core is we're an industry of people who roll their sleeves up and get on with it, And I've really noticed that people have been really adaptable and team spirit's been really high, and, we're all doing things that we wouldn't have done 4 months ago, but, that's hospitality at its core. Maybe we've just had a bit of a reminder how buoyant we are as an industry and how multitasked we all are as individuals as well. So I think that's been a real positive as well.
And Steph, I think that's a great positive note to end on. It's been great to chat to you today. Thanks for your time, and I just wanted to wish you and your team all the best for the road to recovery.
Oh, thanks, Sue. That was been good chatting.
Thanks for listening to the Octopus Revenue Podcast. If you like this episode and you want to hear more, please subscribe so you'll be notified when we release new episodes.